So yeah, this particular series is about what's unique concerning Christianity. And this really is one of the pieces that convinces me personally, I think, that then offers itself to the world. Because so much of religions are the same kind of thing, you know. Talk about peace, talk about love, talk about serving, talk about people who are poor. Those are the kinds of things that everyone kind of agrees with. You don't even necessarily have to be religious to think those are good things. But there are several pieces about Christianity that are unique. And that really makes me go, wait a minute. There are places in which Christianity separates itself. And as we are now moving through Holy Week, we see one of those exemplified before us. Because Jesus has been taking this journey now for 3 years and started out very gently, always about the kingdom of heaven, and that this was going to be a spiritual kingdom that kind of eventually comes out, but at first saying, there's nothing like this kingdom. You would give up anything. It's like a treasure that you would sell everything else that you could possibly have if that meant you could have this treasure, okay? And people go, wow, yeah, I want a part of that. And then he goes, well, understand that this is not like human reason here. This kingdom is going to look different. The first will be last and last will be first. And if you want to be great, you have to serve. And you kind of go, okay, well, that's different. But, you know, if you say it's great, we're all with you. And then he goes on and continues to develop it. And he starts talking about, well, it's all on this pivotal day, when now all sorts of verbiage is out there. There's a hubbub about this Jesus, and different people are saying different things about who he is. And so Jesus asks the disciples, well, who are people saying I am? And then he turns the tables on, well, who do you say I am? You that have followed me now for upwards of 3 years, who do you say I am? And they're kind of like, this sounds like one of those set-up Jesus questions, and I don't want to say the wrong thing. But Peter, he blurts out, you're the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And Jesus goes, well done. And so now I'm going to tell you what the Messiah does. The Messiah is going to be crucified and the third day rise from the dead. And Peter says, no, I'm not going to let that happen. And Jesus equates that well-meaning expression of Peter with the side of Satan. So it's getting difficult to try to figure out the mind of Jesus here. Where is he going? And so here we are. We finally get to Jerusalem. He's been steering clear of there because it is the seat of regional political power. It is the earthly presence for quite some space. There are Jewish leaders there, and there are those Roman leaders there that are the overlords. So he goes to different kinds of places, little out-of-the-way spots, even off to Samaria, where he talks to the Samaritans, the people who are the hated cousins of the Jews. And again, okay, you go to him, and a lot of people getting healed, and he talks really good. He has this like authoritative way that we're not seeing from anybody else. So, all right. And you can understand the backstory for why people don't get who Jesus wants them to see that he is. Because he's supposed to come from the line of David. David is this king who lived 1,000 years before, 3,000 years ago. And he was this grand king. And Israel, arguably, still certainly even today, never had that kind of power from an earthly perspective as it did 3,000 years ago. 1,000 years ago for those folks. And so that was their mindset. And understand, we kind of tend to go, oh, Jesus the Messiah, and we just connect it with him. But there were all sorts of, if you will, Messiahs, because all that meant was anointed. But particularly David was anointed to be king. So we'll just call him a little m Messiah. And then ultimately they were looking for a big M Messiah. So at least they were going to have that kind of presence in the world that they had with David, right? I mean, one would even think It would be better than that, more prestigious. That's what we're looking for. That was what they were taught. And alongside of that was this 2,000-year-old commitment that happened through Abraham that said you're going to be this profound people in a land flowing with milk and honey. It's going to be the promised land. Certainly you're going to be autonomous. Well, they got the promised land. That was, again, right around a little bit before the time of David. And then they sort of messed up, and they lost the land, but then they got the land back eventually. Well, that's all good. That's kind of where they are now, except there's still these Roman overlords, all right? So, if we can just get rid of those guys, we're sitting pretty. That's what we need from the big M Messiah here. Everybody expected that. And so, on this so-called Palm Sunday, it's understandable that the people still aren't getting it. They've now heard excerpts of Jesus one way or another saying this is a spiritual kingdom, it's going to be different, the last are going to be first, the first will be last, and those kinds of things, and even down to things started to get dicey when he threw himself into politics. And, they set him up, but he gave an answer that wasn't one probably that a lot of people were comfortable with, because they said, well, Jesus, should we pay taxes to the Romans, our overlords? And he goes, give me a coin. Okay, got a picture of Caesar on it, evidently belongs to him, give it back to him. So, in essence, he was saying, pay your taxes. And remember, they got cheated all the time from the tax collectors. So, there was probably nothing more infuriating about their day-to-day lives than paying taxes to the Romans. So, Jesus was now getting on the radar, and understand that there is no kind of separation between church and state in those days. Really still isn't in that area. And so those who were religious leaders were also governmental leaders. So it wasn't that you compartmentalized like, oh, okay, now we're talking about spiritual, big picture, visionary stuff, and now over here we're going to talk about, all right, who's going to build a road. It was all together. And so these leaders were trying to figure out how to keep things going from day to day. And then Templegate happened. Jesus enters Jerusalem. Boy, this has been a long time in coming. People were so excited. They go, oh, finally. Man, we've been waiting. We heard about this guy 3 years ago. He can raise people from the dead. It's just awesome. And so certainly, if he can do that, he can kick out some stupid Romans. So we're going to greet him like a king. Throw cloaks on the ground and grab some palm branches and wave those and throw them on the ground because that's what you do for a king. And all right. It's a little odd that he's coming on a donkey. That's pretty humble. I guess you just couldn't find a horse. A king is supposed to be on a great stallion, right? All right, but I'm not going to worry about it. I know what Jesus can do. I've seen him do it. All right, let's go. And great. It's wonderful to have you in town here in Jerusalem, Jesus. Man, we have been pining for this day. Going to be kind of important what he does first of all, isn't it? So he goes to the temple. Well, awesome. That makes sense. The king of the Jews. Go to the temple. Right, okay. And, we're really looking for this guy to tip some tables, right? Absolutely. And he does. But it's not the Roman tables he tips. It's the tables of the religious people. He tips our tables. Oh, this is weird. Because this is the temple. You have to understand what this meant 2,000 years ago in Israel. Solomon, David's son, had built the first temple. And they didn't think of the presence of God in the way we do today. It was very much a physical presence. God was in one place. And so that's why they hauled around the Ark of the Covenant. And so God dwelled in that ark. And wherever you took that ark, they would be victorious in war and what have you. So they built the temple for the permanent residence of God. Way back was the Holy of Holies, where God was understood to be present, and only the high priest could go in once a year into the Holy of Holies, and the word is they actually tied a rope around his foot just in case he was to die in the presence of God and no one else was going to go in and die too, so you could pull him out. It was that big. It was that vital, the temple. And so if that was the only place that God dwelled, well, for sure you'd want to make pilgrimages to be a part of this temple, to experience the presence of God. All right, if you must be that way. It's a little controversial. Yeah, I understand. Sometimes these days people worry about, shouldn't have anything that costs any money in church. That's not really what Jesus was talking about here, because understand, he calls this a den of robbers. It wasn't that people had dollars changing. It was that people were getting cheated on two different levels. First one, from a spiritual perspective. All right. So, those poor people, they didn't have cars. How did they exist? They walked. So maybe you were 80 miles. Doesn't sound bad today. Walking 80 miles in the desert, well, that's not so good. So you're supposed to bring your lamb or your own dove or something that was born into your household, in essence, because it was a part of you. It was your expression of worship. And so, it got to be where it was convenient. It's just too hard to take like that lamb or that dove. It's hard enough to walk the 80 miles. I'm sure not going to bring an animal along with me. So I'll just get me one at the temple. It's a wonderful convenience that they're selling these things there. And in and of itself, that's not a problem, except that it robs us of that personal investment, that this came out of my own life. No, it was just something I purchased for convenience at the door and walked in and go, here's my dove. Have a nice day. Okay. And then it was that people were getting cheated. It's like, evidently Jesus never went to college and took Econ 101. The world is summed up in 3 words: supply and demand. Evidently, he didn't seem to understand this. I mean, we even, in our day, we have convenience stores, right? They are convenient. And if you go there, a loaf of bread is going to cost you more than if you go to the regular grocery store, right? Because it's convenient. Convenience costs more money. It was convenient to go to the temple, get your animal, and have it sacrificed in the temple. What part of that doesn't Jesus understand? I like this Jesus. I like all the expressions of Jesus, but as a man, I connect with this guy. Assertive, focused, decisive. This is wrong, so get out. Whoa. Not the Jesus we normally talk about. There are very few images that people have ever created in paintings and whatever of Jesus kicking people out of the temple and tipping over the tables. I really want more. If you're a good artist, go ahead and make those for me. I will pay. Because this is the Jesus that the people were looking for, but not in the way that he shows up. Because he was supposed to tip the tables over of the Romans. He tips the tables on us. This Jesus, he seems to come and discipline the good people, the religious people, and he goes, has lunch with the bad people. Who is this guy? And so, yeah, Temple Gate is the last straw. Ultimately, it isn't anything personal against this Jesus. He's just riling everybody up. And there is significant concern that he's going to get the Romans all excited. And it's a legitimate concern because as Christians, we kind of move away from this story after the resurrection and we go our own direction. But in AD 70, the Romans are going to finally have enough of these upstart Israelis, and they're going to come and level the temple. This being the second one that was rebuilt, this one will never be rebuilt. Never again will Jews have a temple. So it was understandable. And I actually can come alongside of the high priest Caiaphas and understand, and in some sense, from an earthly, human perspective, I 100% agree. Because he said, look what this Jesus is doing. He's going to bring in the Romans and they're going to lay waste to us. It just makes sense. It's either him or us. Either he dies or we all die. It's a no-brainer. So Jesus had said he's going to go to Jerusalem and be crucified. What kind of good can come out of such a weak human expression as that? So welcome to the power of sacrifice. Now, when you all grow up and go to seminary, because that is what we all have to do before we can die, just saying, you will note that they will talk there about theories of the atonement, because it's interesting. The Bible really never exactly says, this is what all this means, this is why Jesus died, and this is the resurrection, and how that all fits together. Never really does that. So that's why we call it theories. I kind of think that, you kind of think this, okay. And certainly one that's been very popular for the last 100 years or so in America is the one that says, well, Jesus had to die for your sins. Okay, I'm definitely not one to get into a debate, but it just doesn't particularly connect with me as primary, because certainly Jesus was forgiving sins already. That was what got him into big trouble, because they understood that only God can forgive sins, and he was going off just willy-nilly forgiving people's sins, and they go, wait, only God can forgive sins, and he goes, you said it, not me. Okay. The one that connects with me most powerfully is called Christus Victor, because when you go to seminary, you just have to use Latin to sound cool. But at least it's pretty obvious what the meaning is. And it is that we know that a week from today, Jesus is going to rise from the dead. And that changes everything. But you can't have a resurrection without a sacrificial death. And that's the point of where this is going. That not even seemingly evil itself saw this coming. They didn't see the resurrection coming of all things, interestingly enough. They think Friday, they finally beat that Jesus, they killed him, evil wins. But it was a part of the plan of God. It is the power of love that is sacrificial. Everybody touts love. Who doesn't love love? Oh, everybody loves love. Okay, great. What does love mean? When someone says to another person, I love you, what do you mean by this? We go through all the poems and songs, and I love you, and whatever. All you need is love. Bum, ba-da-da-dum. Okay, yeah. What is love? God defines love. It's patient, kind, not boastful, doesn't seek its own way. Okay, fine. God says he himself is love. Whoa, all right, that's a big one. And he exemplifies it this week. That the grandest expression, from the words of the mouth of Jesus no less, says the best kind of love that you can ever give is to be willing to lay down your life for someone else. And then he does that. In Romans 8 it says, nothing can separate us from the love of God. Jesus comes to make it clear to us that nothing can separate us from that love that is God. Not our own sin, not our own resistance, much like the people of Holy Week in the Holy Land. Nothing can separate us, not even if it kills them. So it's all about sacrifice. This movement that goes from what everybody can go, oh yeah, being a servant person is a good thing, serving the needs of others, oh, what gets better than that? And Jesus goes, well, there's one more piece. It's a big one. That you do it sacrificially. That maybe somehow there's a cost to you. A cost that you will get rewarded in eternity, but you won't probably this side of there. But that for the sake of others, you will give of yourself. So as you traverse the world this week, how are you going to live that unique Christian love that is sacrificial and worthy with your family, with your friends, with church people, with even strangers? And how are you going to express this odd human behavior so that somehow those around you know that you come in the name of Jesus? And finally, how are you going to invite and encourage others to come alongside? To understand that there are really good reasons to follow Jesus, and there are some unique reasons to follow Jesus. All of them put together make this the best story, make this the best way to live life now and for all eternity. How are you going to help people grab a hold of the Jesus journey? Let's pray.